So, with the Steam Machine announced this past week, there's been a lot of discussion around Valve with their Steam OS, the hardware itself here, and of course, the specifications. But alongside of a lot of the interviews and the previews that have gone up, there were some very intriguing things that were being shown around the internals of this Steam Machine. And in fact, I'd say it actually shows that this device is quite impressive. Just get from some of the surface level stuff that we're seeing here from Valve, and is significantly ahead of that original Steam machine that we saw, my gosh, more than 10 years ago. And that's what I wanted to take a look at here. Some of the internals with the Steam machine. So if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you're new. And while I spend some time getting all of these different images together, I'm going to give a quick shout out to this video sponsor, Watcher of Realms. In this special crossover, Watcher of Realms meets the legend himself, Count Dracula. When several iconic characters from Dracula enter the world of Tia, everything changes. You can play as Vlad Dracula, explore new event stages, and earn him completely free just by participating. The event adds 4 brand new heroes. Count Dracula, the Dark Prince himself. He's elegant, noble, and his ultimate skill hits like a truck with massive single target burst damage. Lady Mina, a powerhouse with incredible AoE control, who can literally summon Dracula through a mirror during battle, and it looks insane in action. You also meet Dr. Van Helsing, a marksman who rains down silver arrows and then switches to an axe for devastating finishers, and of course, Vlad Dracula, a tanky fighter that charges, blocks enemies, and gets stronger the longer he fights. During this event, there are tons of free rewards, daily logins, and mini-games where you can rack up summons, resources, and even more loot. Watcher of Realms is available on PC and mobile, and it's not your typical strategy RPG. You've got over 200 heroes, deep tactical combat that actually rewards skillful placement and timing, and some seriously high-quality CG and sound design that makes battles feel epic. Plus, the auto fight and quick level tools make it super easy for new players to jump in fast. Are you ready to embrace the darkness? Take the Dracula personality test through my link below to discover your vampire persona and join the Watcher of Realms Dracula event today. Scan the QR code on screen to download Watcher of Realms for free on PC, Android, and iOS, and I'll see you in Tia. Just stay out of the sunlight. So I went through a bunch of those previews and a lot of the videos that were shared and picked out some of the screenshots that really give us a pretty good look at some of the internals of this device, but I did want to go back to the OG, the original Steam machine, one that I'm sure many people don't really remember that well because it was back in like 2013 or something. It was more than 10 years ago, and this one was from Zotac, and you can even see the controller that accompanied it. Yeah, it wasn't the most intuitive looking thing, and I mean, people who used it, there's a reason the Steam machine went away for a while. But what was really funny, we can see the box behind it here. I mean, we did have something that was somewhat compact, but it did still take up a lot of space, we'll say, under the TV. It's not like how we see this GameCube or the GameCube, where it's 6 inches by 6 inches for the overall space. No, this was them basically putting together a full-fledged, I guess, small form factor PC. It was a little smaller, but not by much. And in fact, many cases that come out now for small form factor that you can buy in like aftermarket parts might even be a little smaller than this. I mean, you can see they had a full video card. I think this was a GTX 780 back then that they forced into this system. And you can even see the motherboard. It looks like one of those small ITX boards. I mean, that's really what it was. And this was a way for them to try to start getting their own OS out there. In fact, they even shipped with like a USB recovery image that you would use if you had issues with it. But these are like early days. And it was mostly Valve looking to partners to make their Steam machine, right? So it wasn't necessarily Valve in the weeds trying to figure this out. And you can see the results of, well, Zotac basically putting together a mini PC and loading the OS onto it. All right, so now we fast forward more than a decade later, and we, of course, have our Steam machine, the little GameCube looking thing. And as I mentioned, there were a lot of interviews and previews that took place, and we do also have some renderings from Valve that I was looking at. So this right here is the back of the device. And we can see the two screws at the top here, and then of course the large fan in the middle. I mean that's how Valve is going to cool this thing. One fan that's going to pull air directly through the system and then out the back. All right. Now, while there are two screws at the top, I did notice it's missing two notches that I think we have. Yeah, Gamers Nexus. So they were a very good source for some of the images. They seem to have a bit more interest in the internals than just about any other outlet that I came across for the most part. And with good reason, of course, they are very, very, very into the fine details for a lot of this stuff, especially with things like airflow and power draw, and even how they were able to draw out some of the traces and stuff for GDDR6 memory. But here we can see there are two small tabs at the bottom. This appears to be an engineering sample, but I think it would be a good idea for them to keep these two tabs, and they very well may, and this is just a rendering that really didn't bother to have those tabs at the bottom. It's kind of unnecessary for that. But like here, this would make it a lot easier with the two screws to then pop this off with a spudger or I guess a flathead screwdriver. The way I think this is going to work for disassembly, two screws here, the back pops off. That would then allow you to get to the fan very easily if there's a problem. But then to take the rest of it out, you would have to go a bit further. As you can see, it sort of comes out, I think, almost like in a shelf orientation where you're going to unscrew. I'm picturing 6 screws. I already mentioned the 2 here, 1 and 2. Then there are going to, I think, be 4 more, 1, 2, 3, 4 at the bottom that are also doubling as stands. And that would then allow the entire thing to slide out towards you, basically to the back. All right. And what you'll be left with, as you can see, is just a very large still cube, but very large stack of different components. And this, I think, is probably the most impressive thing that I'm seeing out of this device. It's incredibly modular, at least from the stuff that we can see so far. This is about as much as they were willing to break the system down for different outlets and stuff was right here. It's like, hey, you could take it out of the plastic enclosure and then flip it around and look, but we're not going to start taking any other screws out. All right. And they had it all set up and ready to go. Right there, it seemed like on the desk as just a sample for people to look over. And I've noticed that many companies are doing this more and more now. Sony will release an entire video that shows one of their own engineers tear the entire PlayStation 5 down and explain it. Microsoft, when they did the Xbox Series, I remember they had press out and they allowed them to take the system apart. They showed them how to do it. Like, all of that is a really cool idea to show that you're pretty confident in the engineering behind it, and it seems like Valve is incredibly confident around this, and with good reason. As I mentioned, I was looking around this device. Here's a shot, then this would be the back of it with a large fan, and it does seem like they really considered the idea of repairability and in some cases the ability to upgrade the system. I think repairability for something like this is very, very important, since we've seen Valve take it seriously with the Steam Deck, and they partnered with iFixit, so you could buy all kinds of replacement parts. And here, so just as an example, you see this part down here that houses your USB-C to USB Type A and your LAN port here. All right. That's a pretty significant number of ports that you'd want to be able to replace easily. Well, this appears to be its own board. In fact, there's a cable here that's running up and then I assume to the motherboard, which is sandwiched between a massive heatsink and the power supply. I kind of think it's going to just clip into the power supply again, just to make it, a lot of it's around the size of the system. So when you have the board just plugged directly into it, there's less in terms of having to route cables and stuff. And again, it's not new. We've seen this with consoles, with Xbox. The Xbox One X is one of those devices where I look at it and I'm like, I can't believe Microsoft got it that small. And those are things they would do. You clip the power supply directly to it. Similar thing here, but this seems to be an entire board with a couple of screws you can see right here. This would come off, it would unclip, and you should be able to just replace this entire board, which is great news since, we know how it can go with ports sometimes. You could have, for example, something plugged in here, maybe a thumb drive, and you go to put it into your entertainment center forgetting about it, boom, runs right into the back of the wall or something, and maybe does some damage to this board in some way. So I like the idea of being able to not only get to this easily, but also replace it. Think about this. 2 screws, most likely to get the back off, and then you can get to this board if you need to replace it. There are also antennas routed all over the place in some of these images, and it's smart the way the valve's positioned. So one, for example, is at the back here at the top. You can see right by the plastic shroud for the fan, and then there appear to be 2 other ones towards the front of the system. And remember, Valve is trying to accommodate here. They have Wi-Fi 6E, they have Bluetooth, and they have a direct connection for their Steam controller that's completely built in. So all of this working, of course, within the design that they have, but having them towards the top, so it's almost at the highest point of the console, and then on the outside of any metal casing should help to prevent any serious interference. Now, the thing that's so interesting about this, you can kind of see how it's cooled, and it's so simple in the sense that here's a massive heatsink, and then we're just going to route air through it. That's it. It's as straightforward as it gets. And I mean, look, Valve is, so they're going to have their dedicated GPU that does seem to be around a 7600M. And while Valve keeps saying 4K 60, we're thinking it's like 1440p with upscaling, FSR, 1080p with FSR, right? So that would be more in line with the thinking, I believe. But that either way, they have to cool this thing, and it's really interesting to see them just go the route of massive heatsink and fan, and even the front, where we have this would have been the cover that would go on there. I mean, you can just see it, just plenty of airway here for them to pull air through, shoot it out the back. Apparently, they're also going to pull it in from the underneath on the sides here, and it's going to scoop air that way. I almost wonder if people will do temperature tests. What's the difference in temperature if you don't have any front on at all versus if you have one on? Now, it should be able to still pull in plenty of air around the sides, as it does seem like there's good spacing, but still makes you wonder. Valve mentioned that you can take this front plate off, customization being a big thing, but also to be able to clean it. I mean, here's the thing. One of the more annoying parts of a laptop, or even a game console, you can say, getting to both sides of the heatsink. It appears for this, you'll be able to get to both sides of the heatsink with minimal issues. All right, so here's I mean, this would be the front of the heatsink that's typically very difficult to get to. You could see it right here. So if you have dust bunnies or something that piles up, vacuum cleaner, compressed air just to help it get through, and then the fan will take care of the rest. And then, as I mentioned, on the opposite side right here, with this plate off, you should be able to get to that fan, or maybe even the fan, which actually, if we look at it here, it doesn't look like there's too much. I mean, these would be rubber grommets almost that are holding it, so if it vibrates, you won't hear it much. It almost looks like the fan, while it plugs in, there's maybe not much else holding it in place, and maybe you can just pop that off even, and then get to the opposite side of the heatsink. So I like the thoughtfulness around cleaning here, as overheating is one of the biggest causes of malfunction. I'll tell you that now, with all types of systems. The PCs, game consoles, handhelds now, as they have active cooling solutions with fans, all of that. Just dust bunnies can pile up, and then the fan and the system can't breathe because the fan can't pull air through. So good to see that there. And I do want to point a few other things out here. So one, I mentioned the modularity of this back port right here. That seems to be kind of a trend, though, for this device. And Gamers Nexus, I think, got the best image that I've seen so far of the bottom. Okay, so again, a couple of more ports here. You have your HDMI and your display port on one board, and I'll tell you now, I've seen so many HDMI ports get broken on the PlayStation 4 was like notorious for this, but just systems in general. You know, something can happen to it and the HDMI port is just destroyed. And most times it is, yes, just part of the board. You have to desolder it and then replace it. So I like the idea that they even have DisplayPort and HDMI on a separate board. But then we have a look at the bottom. This is the NVMe right here. And so you would have to take the entire shelf, we'll say, unit out. And you can see, by the way, the 4 posts that I think will have those screws, 1, 2, 3, 4 right here. But once you remove maybe 6 screws total and you then slide this out of the plastic enclosure, here it is. And it looks like it has the socket here, so you can have the longer 2280. And that's one of the reasons I think the 512 is going to be so sought after, mostly by people who are willing to do this, but just, I mean, it's going to be cheaper. However, the idea of saying, I'll get the 512 now, and down the road, I'll upgrade to 4 terabytes. I mean, yeah, that's very appealing to have that upgrade path. And I like that it's not buried. They could have easily, I mean, I assume put this on the board somewhere. We'll get a look at the board to see how compact it is, and maybe they couldn't have, but they could have made this much more difficult to get to. They could have also made it easier, as in the bottom has a door that you unscrew and then you can see this. I get it, but this isn't bad. I mean, it's right there. It's set up pretty nicely to use either form for it. So you can get a smaller one if you want, the larger one. And I think I would get the 512, and I personally, myself, would just upgrade to something like a 4 terabyte and then I guess reload SteamOS, as Valve should make that available. But again, you can see from this angle as well, large fin heatsink here, and then the 4 screw post at the bottom. Definitely want to point out that that front micro SD card slot seems to be modular here, as it's held in with 2 screws. And I didn't really see too many great shots of the front here necessarily, but it looks like the SD card slot and both USB ports are separate from that main motherboard, along with the power button here as well. So I guess both of those should be completely replaceable. Great news for either, since front USB ports and of course micro SD card slots tend to be very vulnerable, especially if this is being marketed to the mainstream. Let's face it, there's going to be a couple of micro SD cards that most likely go in upside down and maybe do some damage there. So good to hear. It should be replaceable and is something you get to right away once you remove just that initial unit from the casing. The thing that's to me is so impressive, and we need to get more information, as of course when the system comes out, I'll do a teardown on it. I just want to see more about the modularity of this device. We did get word, okay, that while the VRAM, that's just soldered to the board, that's not coming off, okay? So 8 gigabytes is what it is. That's how the system's going to be sitting. People were also complaining about 16 gigabytes of DDR5. That apparently is socketed to the motherboard, as in it should just be RAM sticks. But if it's just that, you should be able to then buy 32 gigabytes of DDR5 and just upgrade it yourself. How necessary would 32 gigabytes be in this system to play these kind of games? I mean, it is a PC. More RAM is typically better, sure. And you might want to load maybe Windows on it or something. So, I mean, it's kind of like, hey, the option is there if you're someone who wants to go up to some crazy amount of RAM that this thing can support. Again, it's just nice to have those options. I would just have to see what the process is to get to that RAM, because now we're talking about most likely the heatsink coming off. Maybe the power supply having to be pulled off completely, as everything, it's very purposeful to fit in this small cube. And from this point forward is where it would get complicated. So I would just have to see what we're dealing with on this. But man, I got to tell you guys, when I saw the cube form factor, initially I was excited because it looked like a GameCube. But then I thought, ooh, okay, how difficult is this thing going to be to work on? So far, so good from what we're seeing. So up until we get this thing and we can really tear it down and see how many screws it takes to get to the inside, to the board, and what else maybe would need replacing and how is that process. So it's looking good. It's looking up there with like the Steam Deck, which also was pretty friendly when it came to internal mods for the most part, and certainly replacement parts. So Valve thought a lot about this design, and it's certainly more impressive the further you go in, even beyond just the initial plastic enclosure itself. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below with the Steam Machine. I mean, to me, I think it looks really, really cool from an engineering perspective, and we still need to see how it performs when it comes to the games, but also that pricing, because there's, again, a lot's gone into this device, and if they can get this thing at 600 or less, 500 I think would be great for this system. Valve really has something here, and that's the hope. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.